Boom 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 boom.
You know that feeling, right? When you're watching a movie or reading a book and it just sinks its hooks into you and won't let go.
Oh, yeah. There's definitely a kind of magic in stories that really grab you like that. They just stay with you.
Feels almost, I don't know, instinctive when you're in it.
Right. But underneath that feeling, there's usually some incredibly precise craft going on. Storytellers aren't just like throwing things out there randomly.
No, they're using these fundamental building blocks, these structures and techniques that really resonate with us, often without us even realizing why.
Uh-huh. And that's exactly what we're diving into today.
We've been digging into sources all about the insights of Robert McKee, the legendary story guru.
Yeah, focusing particularly on his ideas about story structure, like right down to the nuts and bolts, chapters and scenes.
Right. So our mission today is to unpack these basic units. Let's, for a moment, look beyond just the big picture and really get into the essential bits McKee talks about.
What he calls chapters, and then even smaller, those crucial scenes.
Exactly. And figure out how they work together to build that emotional impact, create the tension, basically how they keep you hooked.
And this isn't just abstract theory, right? We're talking concrete examples.
Definitely. We'll be using plenty of examples from well-known films, loads of them mentioned in the sources, so you can actually see these ideas in action on screen.
Making it tangible, seeing the architecture behind the magic.
Precisely. Okay, so let's start big. Chapter design. When McKee talks about chapters, is he just talking about like acts in a play, curtain comes down, that sort of thing?
Not quite. I mean, it's related, but his definition seems more about function, doesn't it?
Yeah. A chapter, for McKee, is a big structural unit, and it contains these really significant turning points.
It's made up of several scenes, sure, but the key thing is how it ends.
Exactly. It ends with a major, often irreversible change in the character's life or their situation. It's all about a big shift in the story's value.
So less a literal break, more a moment where something fundamental has shifted, like a point of no return for the character or the plot.
That's it. The value, whether it's, justice, love, hope, power, truth, whatever, it's shifted significantly. That shift marks the end of one chunk of the story and the start of the next.
Okay. And the sources really hammer home the classic design, the arc plot. That's the dominant one we see everywhere, right? Blockbusters, dramas.
Yeah. Things like The Godfather Part 2, Thelma and Louise, even Four Weddings and a Funeral. It's everywhere.
So why is it so incredibly, well, common?
McKee's argument is that its power comes from how it aligns with our really deep-seated human expectations. We instinctively look for patterns, don't we?
Cause and effect, a journey that makes sense.
Right. We want a clear progression, some kind of resolution.
Yeah.
And the classic design delivers that.
What are the hallmarks of it then? What makes it classic?
Typically, you've got an active main character, someone driving the action, pursuing a goal.
Taking charge.
Yeah. And they face external obstacles, which is naturally dramatic and, importantly for film, visual.
You can see the struggle.
And there's that strong chain of cause and effect. Events feel connected, logical. It helps us buy into the story world.
A consistent reality, at least while we're watching.
Exactly. A world we can step into and believe in. And crucially, there's the promise of a satisfying closed ending.
Questions answered, conflicts resolved. Feels neat.
It does. McKee suggests it kind of mirrors how we try to impose order on our own messy lives. There's a comfort in that structure.
Like a well-structured argument or, yeah, a satisfying meal, but not all stories fit that mold, do they?
Definitely not. McKee also talks about the mini-plot.
Okay, mini-plot. Sounds smaller.
It often is, or at least more internal. The character might be more passive, more reactive. They're often dealing with internal conflicts.
Psychological stuff, moral gray areas.
Exactly. So less about grand external action and more about subtle nuances, internal shifts.
And the conflicts themselves, the value changes, they might be quieter, less explosive.
Yeah, more subtle. And mini-plots frequently have open endings. They leave you with questions, maybe a feeling that life just continues after the credits roll.
Any examples jump out?
Places in the Heart gets mentioned. And Paris, Texas, that film's famously ambiguous ending, sparked tons of debate. A classic mini-plot feel.
Right, leaves you pondering. Okay, then there's the anti-plot. The name alone. It sounds like it's deliberately breaking things.
It really is. It's a radical approach. Anti-plot intentionally messes with the conventions of that classic design.
How so?
Causality might go out the window. Reality can become inconsistent, even absurd. Endings are often deliberately left unresolved, or they might just stop.
Embracing randomness?
Chaos. Pretty much. It can even shatter the timeline. Think about something like Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Oh, okay. Obvious comedy example.
That's a clear one the sources bring up. Or you get more challenging art house films like last year at Marienbad, which just plays games with memory and what's real.
So it's less about commercial appeal.
Often, yeah. McKee notes it's more about pushing artistic boundaries, really challenging what the audience expects from a story.
Almost making you question why we expect those classic structures in the first place.
Exactly. It's like taking the clock apart to see how it works.
Yeah.
And then there's one more, multi-plot.
Okay, this one sounds like what it is. Multiple plots.
Pretty much. You've got multiple main characters or several parallel storylines woven together.
Pulp Fiction instantly comes to mind. That script juggles timelines, characters, brilliant stuff.
Absolutely. A prime example. Or older films like Grand Hotel, which kind of popularized that structure, or even way back to D.W. Griffith's Intolerance.
So instead of one hero's journey,
You're following several different paths, often linked by theme, or maybe just intersecting by chance.
gives you a much broader perspective, doesn't it? A sense of a wider world.
Right. It can explore themes about fate, coincidence, how different lives bounce off each other.
Okay, so those are the big frameworks chapters, different designs. But what actually lights the fuse? What's the very first spark that gets any of these stories rolling?
That's the inciting incident. And the interesting thing is, it doesn't always have to be some massive earth-shattering event.
No?
Not necessarily. It's simply the event that knocks the character's ordinary life off balance. It disrupts their equilibrium and pushes them into the story's main problem or journey.
It's the catalyst, the
Yeah.
thing that makes the rest of the story have to happen.
Exactly. And it could be something really personal, almost quiet,
Like what?
like in Kramer versus Kramer, where the inciting incident is just a spouse deciding to leave. Devastating, but internally driven.
Okay. Or it could be completely accidental.
Sure, like a death the character suddenly has to cope with, like in Alice doesn't live here anymore.
Or it could be that big, sudden external threat, the shark attack in Jaws.
Right. The scale can vary wildly, but the function is always the same. Life as they knew it is over, a new problem has arrived.
And timing, does it have to happen right at the start?
Often, yeah. It's frequently placed early on, sometimes literally page 1 or at the opening scene. Think Kafka's Metamorphosis, or Kramer versus Kramer, or Jaws again. It hooks the audience immediately into the conflict.
But sometimes it feels like the main story takes a while to kick in. Can you delay it?
You can, but McKee really stresses this. If you delay that main inciting incident, you absolutely need other strong hooks to keep the audience invested.
Like what? Subplots.
Often, yeah. Compelling subplots or really strong early scenes that define the character and make us care. Think about Rocky.
Okay.
Before he gets the offer for the big fight, that's the main inciting incident. We spend time seeing his life, right? Working for the loan shark, his awkward relationship with Adrian.
We get invested in him first.
Exactly. Those early scenes hook us emotionally, so when the big opportunity finally arrives, we're already rooting for him.
Makes sense. Okay, speaking of crucial moments, the sources call the crisis a mandatory scene. Mandatory seems strong. Why is it non-negotiable?
Because it's the point where the central question, the core conflict set up by that inciting incident, finally comes to a head. It has to be addressed.
The moment of truth.
Right. The character faces their biggest dilemma, their toughest choice. A choice that will absolutely test their core values, push them to the limit, and have consequences they can't take back.
It's the confrontation the whole story has been building towards.
Precisely. The audience is subconsciously waiting for it. If the story doesn't deliver that ultimate showdown, that final difficult decision, it just feels unsatisfying, like a promise broken.
It's where we see who the character really is under pressure.
Exactly. Now, how do turning points differ from that big crisis moment? They sound similar.
They are related, but turning points are smaller, more frequent shifts. They happen whenever some crucial new information comes to light, or a character takes an action that suddenly pivots the narrative.
Changes the direction, for better or worse.
Yeah, sends the story spinning in any direction. Think about Wall Street when Bud Fox decides to accept that insider information.
Ah, okay. That single choice.
That one decision totally changes his path, right? That's a turning point. They keep the story dynamic, surprising, and keep raising the stakes between those larger chapter climaxes.
Gotcha. And what about the number of chapters? Is it always 3 acts, like people say?
McKee is pretty adamant about this.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. While 3 acts, beginning, middle, end, is definitely common, and it often works well.
It's not a rule carved in stone.
Not at all. Stories have different rhythms. Shakespeare often used 5 acts, 4 weddings and a funeral that had 4 distinct chapters. Raiders of the Lost Ark arguably has like 7 key sequences or chapters. The cook, the thief, his wife and her lover used 8.
Wow, okay, so it's less about hitting a magic number.
And more about the story's own internal rhythm, the effectiveness of those turning points in driving things forward.
Exactly. The structure serves the story, not the other way around. It's about meaningful shifts, however many that takes.
Right. Okay, let's add another layer. Subplots. Are they just distractions or do they serve a real purpose?
Oh, if they're done well, they are absolutely essential. They deepen and enrich the main story. They should never feel like just filler.
How do they enrich it?
Well, a good subplot can echo the main theme from a different angle. It can reveal facets of a character you wouldn't see otherwise. It can balance the tone, maybe add some comedy or romance to a really tense thriller.
Let's go back to Rocky again. His relationship with Adrian isn't just a side thing, is it?
Not even close. It's fundamental. It affects why he takes the fight, how he approaches it, her belief in him, their connection. It raises the emotional stakes of his main struggle for self-respect.
So it amplifies the main plot, doesn't just run alongside it.
Exactly. And subplots can also just add more obstacles for the main character, ramping up the overall tension.
Okay, now for the big payoff moment, the climax. McKee seems to put a ton of weight on this. Can a weak climax really wreck an otherwise decent film?
According to McKee, absolutely. He is really clear on this. The climax is the ultimate delivery. It's where everything converges, the final meaning hits, the emotional energy peaks.
All the promises the story made have to be paid off there.
Right. If you've built everything beautifully for, say, 2 hours, and then the ending just kind of whimpers out, the audience feels cheated, all that investment, gone.
It leaves a bad final impression.
Totally. He uses Kiss of the Spider-Woman as an example. Some might find the beginning a bit slow, but the climax delivers such profound emotional and thematic power, it elevates the whole film, makes it unforgettable.
Powerful stuff. What about those trickier endings? Ironic endings, false endings.
Okay, ironic endings play with expectations. It's that win while losing or lose while winning idea. Something is gained, but at a terrible cost. Or maybe the character achieves their goal but realizes it was hollow.
Like a bittersweet victory. Or just bitter.
Could be either.
Yeah.
The sources mention Othello Dufflo. He gets the truth he sought, but it destroys him. That's pure negative irony, a real gut punch.
Yeah, and false endings.
Those are pure narrative tricks, usually for suspense or thrillers. You think the story is done, the villain is defeated, the conflicts are resolved.
And then bam.
Exactly. Surprise. Something unexpected happens. The threat returns, and the story kicks back into gear. Think of the Terminator movies, where he just keeps coming back.
Or those classic Hitchcock twists in Psycho or Vertigo.
Perfect examples. They create genuine shock and ramp up the tension right when you thought it was safe. They play on our assumptions about how stories are supposed to end.
Okay, great. So we've got the big picture, chapters, arcs. Now let's zoom way in to the absolute basic particle, the scene. What's the #1 rule for a good scene, according to McKee?
This is where it gets really practical and I think super useful. A scene, okay, it's the basic unit, usually continuous action, one time, one place.
The building block.
Right. But McKee's absolute non-negotiable rule is a scene must change a value in the character's life.
A value like hope, freedom, love, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Or justice, truth, power, security, status.
Yeah.
Any of those core human states. The scene has to start with that value in one condition. Say, it's positive, the character feels hopeful, and by the end of that scene, that same value must be in a different condition. Maybe it's flipped to negative, they're now hopeless. Or maybe it's even more positive, but it has to have shifted somehow.
So if I look at a scene and the character situation regarding hope or justice or whatever is exactly the same at the end as it was at the start.
McKee would basically call that scene dead weight. It's not doing its job. It's not moving the story forward or revealing anything new about the character's progression in that moment. The value needs to flip, or at least intensify or diminish.
Got an example.
The sources use the West Side Story audition scene. The character starts off feeling insecure, right? That's a negative state for confidence or status.
Oh, yeah.
Then, through the scene's events, she faces some hurdles, makes a choice, finds some inner strength, and by the end, she's moving towards a more positive state, the courage to actually go for the interview. That shift, negative to positive, is the scene's core function.
And this is where show don't tell becomes absolutely vital, especially for film.
Oh, massively. Like Hitchcock famously said, when the script is finished, the film is ready. Dialogue just lets them talk like people. Cinema is visual first.
You can say so much with just a look, a gesture, how someone moves.
Totally. The sources bring up that waiter scene in Bergman's The Silence. Apparently, it's just incredible tension and unspoken connection, almost all done non-verbally, through looks, actions, the atmosphere. Pure visual storytelling driven by those value shifts and the underlying conflict.
So when you're writing this, the script shouldn't be full of, like, fancy literary descriptions.
No, McKee argues against that. A screenplay isn't literature. It's a blueprint for a visual medium. The descriptions need to be functional. They need to help the director, the actors, the designer visualize the scene as it will look and feel on screen.
Focus on what we see, the actions, the concrete detail.
Exactly. Instead of writing "he felt sad," you write something like, "his shoulders slumped, he turned away from her, stared out the window." Show the sadness through action.
Makes sense. McKee suggests techniques for this.
Yeah, like breaking scenes down into distinct visual moments, or using what he calls a wide-shot scene technique, to force yourself to think about the overall visual action first. It's all about what happens and who does what.
Okay, so value change is key. What else drives a scene?
Conflict. That's the engine. A character wants something that's like a positive charge, then they hit an obstacle, or another character wants the opposite that's a negative charge.
And the scene is the interaction between those forces.
Pretty much. That tension, that push and pull, is what propels the scene forward. Think about Al Pacino's detective in Sea of Love.
Right, the internal conflict.
Exactly. His scenes are electric because he's torn between his duty, pursuing justice, that's his positive value, and his growing forbidden attraction of the suspect, which puts him in a dangerous negative spot. That conflict fuels every interaction.
And often that conflict isn't spoken aloud, it's in the subtext.
Ah, subtext. So crucial. It's all the unspoken stuff, the gap between what characters say and what they really mean or feel or want.
Because people rarely just say exactly what's on their mind.
Right. We lie, we hide things, we imply, we deflect. Think about Woody Allen's Annie Hall. Alvy's narration is often him trying to justify himself, control the story.
While the actual scenes show his insecurity.
Exactly. The subtext is bubbling up underneath. Or think about doctors in a show like Hospital, hiding their own fears or ambitions behind all the medical talk. Even silence can be loaded with subtext.
How do you actually write that? How do you put subtext on the page?
You really have to know your characters inside out. What do they desperately want? What are they terrified of? What secrets are they keeping buried? If you know that, you can write dialogue and actions where the real meaning simmers just below the surface.
And a great way to force that inner character out into the open is through a dilemma.
Oh yeah, dilemma is a powerful tool. You force a character to make a really tough choice, maybe between two bad options or two good things they can't both have, or a clear good versus bad choice. But the good choice requires a huge sacrifice.
Puts their values right on the line.
Absolutely. Yeah. It ruthlessly reveals who they are and what they prioritize when the chips are down. And it really deepens the audience's connection.
The sources mention Donna Floor and her two husbands.
Right. Does she choose the safe, reliable, but kind of boring dead husband? Or the passionate, exciting, but also dead husband? It's a choice that reveals everything about her desires.
Or the horrific choice in Sophie's Choice. Unforgettable.
Exactly. Those moments stick with you because they strip character down to its core.
Okay, another big challenge. Avoiding cliches when you're building these scenes. Any advice there?
McKee's method sounds simple, but it takes discipline. Brainstorm alternatives. If your first idea for how something happens feels familiar, like you've seen it 100 times.
Like the rom-com characters bumping into each other and spilling coffee.
Exactly that. Write it down, fine, get it out. But then force yourself to come up with 5, 10, 15 other ways that same basic interaction could happen.
Push beyond the obvious.
Yeah. Look for something unexpected, something that feels specific to these characters, this situation, this story's themes. It takes real observation, maybe some research, and just pushing your imagination.
What about atmosphere? Setting the mood, the tone. How important is that?
Atmosphere is definitely important. It sets the emotional tone, immerses the audience, tells us how to feel about what's happening. But
There's a but.
there's a but. The sources are clear. Atmosphere alone won't save a scene. A beautifully shot, moody scene will still feel empty if it doesn't have that core value change or conflict or subtext driving it.
Style can't just paper over a lack of substance.
Not for long, anyway. Think about a scene where someone confronts a suspected traitor. You could film that with a tense, shadowy noir atmosphere. Or you could give it a weirdly bright, almost comedic atmosphere for dark comedy.
The atmosphere changes how we experience the emotion.
Exactly. But the scene still needs the underlying mechanics. The trust shifting to suspicion, value change, their opposing goals, conflict. What they're not saying, subtext.
And point of view whose perspective we see it from that must have a huge impact too.
Critical impact. Whose eyes are we looking through? An argument between a parent and child feels totally different if we're seeing it from the parent's perspective, feeling their frustration, versus seeing it from the child's perspective, feeling their confusion or anger.
It directs our empathy.
Completely. You're deciding whose emotional moment it really is.
What about the physical location or setting? Can a really cool location carry a scene?
Location is important, yeah. It grounds the story, gives visual context,
Yeah.
but the source material warns against relying only on a compelling setting if the internal dynamics, the conflict, the value shift aren't there.
The scene might just sag.
Yeah, exactly. The location should ideally amplify or comment on the dramatic action, not just be window dressing.
Unless the location is the source of the pressure.
Right, like in 12 Angry Men. It's almost all in one room. The tension comes entirely from the characters, their arguments, the shifting alliances, the claustrophobia of the space itself.
Versus, say, a James Bond film that jumps all over the world.
Totally different strategy. That relies on visual variety, exotic locales as part of the thrill. Both work, but they pose different challenges for keeping the drama moving.
Okay, so scenes are the atoms. How do they clump together?
Scenes combine to form sequences. A sequence is basically a string of related scenes that work together to accomplish a larger dramatic movement within the chapter.
Like a mini-story within the chapter.
Kind of. For example, a sequence might cover a character's entire effort to find a specific clue, maybe involving several scenes like searching a room, interviewing someone, chasing a lead, or a sequence showing someone trying to get a job.
So scenes build sequences and sequences build chapters.
That's the hierarchy. It's a nested structure. And the way the overall story progresses through these structures isn't always just a straight line forward. McKee talks about different types of progression.
Like deepening. What's that?
Think of ordinary people. The story doesn't just move towards resolving the family conflict. It also digs deeper inward. It peels back layers of guilt, trauma, unspoken pain within the family. The progression is depthward.
Okay. And expanding and deepening.
Chinatown is the classic example here. It starts as a seemingly small, private eye case.
Yeah, marital infidelity.
But as Jake investigates, the case expands outwards, revealing this huge conspiracy involving water, land, power, corruption.
It gets bigger and bigger.
Exactly. It extends in scope. But it also deepens thematically, exploring those dark themes about power, incest, the past controlling the present, both expanding and deepening.
Wow, okay. Any other types?
There's symbolic or archetypal progression. Think about Sarah Connor in The Terminator.
Starts as a waitress.
Right, totally ordinary. But through the ordeal, through facing this relentless threat and finding her strength, she's transformed. She becomes this almost mythic figure, the mother of the future leader.
She becomes a symbol.
Exactly. The story progresses by elevating her from a normal person to an archetype. The gritty LA streets almost become like a mythological battleground. Her journey is symbolic.
Fascinating. Okay, let's switch gears slightly. Exposition. Giving the audience background info without being boring. How do you do that well?
The exposition problem. It's tricky. McKee's golden rule is basically give the audience only what they need to know and, crucially, only when they want to know it.
Don't just dump information on them at the start.
No. Avoid the info dump at all costs. You have to make them want the information first.
How? Create mystery?
Exactly. Create curiosity. Pose questions that make the audience lean in, desperate for the answer. And again, show, don't tell. Embed information in action and character behavior rather than just having someone explain the backstory.
And the most powerful exposition
Often comes when a crucial piece of past information is revealed at a key moment in the present, and it changes everything we thought we knew.
like those big twists we talked about, the "she's my sister" and my daughter line in Chinatown, or "no, I am your father" in Empire Strikes Back.
Precisely. Those reveals land with such force because they arrive exactly when the audience is grappling with the central mystery, and they have immediate, massive, dramatic consequences. They reframe everything.
So avoid just having characters talk about the past unless it's absolutely necessary and dramatized.
Yeah, McKee advises against lazy stuff like unnecessary dream sequences explaining backstory, or most kinds of montage that just summarize information without making it dramatic.
Okay, last big topic, dialogue. What's its role in this whole visual structure?
It's important, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
but McKee definitely sees it as secondary to the visual storytelling. His mantra is often less is more with dialogue.
So it shouldn't do the heavy lifting.
Ideally, no. Good dialogue should sound realistic. People hesitate, they use fragments, they grunt, sometimes silence says more. Read it out loud. Does it sound like how this specific character would actually talk, not just generic chatter?
And it absolutely has to carry.
Subtext. Yes. That's where dialogue earns its keep. It's not just conveying plot points. It's revealing character, creating tension, hinting at all the unspoken stuff churning underneath the surface.
Wow. Okay, so we've really gone from the macro to the micro, haven't we?
We really have. From those big chapter structures, classic, mini, anti, multi-plot, all the way down to that core rule for a single scene. It must change a value.
Driven by conflict revealed through subtext and maybe a tough dilemma.
Yeah, and seeing how scenes build into sequences into chapters, how stories progress differently, deepening, expanding, the art of handling exposition, the role of dialogue.
It's like getting the blueprints for storytelling.
It really is.
Yeah.
And understanding these principles, even just a little, can totally change how you watch movies or read books, can it?
Oh, definitely. You start seeing why a scene hits you so hard, or why an ending felt a bit flat. You notice the choices the storyteller made.
You see the craft behind the feeling.
And if you happen to be writing your own stories, this stuff is invaluable, like a checklist. Does my scene have a value change? Is my chapter climax strong enough? Does this subplot really connect?
Absolutely. So to leave you with something to chew on until our next deep dive, think about a story you've experienced recently. Film, book, show, whatever.
Can you pinpoint a specific scene where you really felt that shift? Where a character situation regarding hope or trust or power just fundamentally changed from beginning to end?
Or think about a big chapter climax. Was there one that felt particularly powerful, or maybe one that fell short in really altering the character's course?
Where did you feel the impact or the lack of it in the overall story? Try to spot those building blocks in action.
Yeah, reflect on that structure, feel its power, or its absence.
Boom, 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 boom.